Good afternoon, Mr. Lewis.
Good afternoon, sir.
The first thing that you investigated in the case, as I understand it, was retrieving a prison call from Crystal Kelley to Jessica Kelley. Is that right?
Yes, sir, it is.
And that went from 6:08 until 6:23 p.m. on the night of the murder, didn't it?
It was either 6:08 or 6:09, but it was right around that time, with about 15 minutes on the night of the murder, yes, sir.
Okay. Now let me show you an exhibit S for identification. Do you recognize exhibit S?
I do.
What is it?
It's a still shot from the giant gas station near the apartments.
Okay. I'd move S into evidence.
No objection. S will be admitted.
Let me publish if the court will allow me. Let's see how we're doing. Let's see where we're into. There we go. Now this is a surveillance video that was collected from the giant giant gas station. Is that right?
Yes, sir, it is.
And this is Fabian,
Yes, it is.
and this is Jessica. I'm sorry, this is Victoria.
Yes, that is Victoria and the defendant, yes.
And these are the clothes that she was wearing on the day in question.
Is that the school she went to, the clothes she wore into school?
Right.
Is that the jumper? It's so blurry. I know she's wearing the jumper. I can't tell from this
Okay.
still shot.
And the boots are what she was wearing, those gold boots. Did you know?
You know, I don't know.
Okay. Now, the trip to the giant gas station, the cell phone records tell us that lasted from 6 to 6:25 p.m. that evening. Is that right?
Approximately, yes.
So the conversation between Crystal and Jessica that we heard, gosh, it's been 2 weeks ago now, that began a few minutes after they left for the giant station, didn't it?
That's correct, sir.
And it ended just a couple of minutes before they returned inside the residence at 8:08.
It ended before they returned back to 8:08, yes, sir.
Did Jessica in her conversations with you say she ended the call when she heard them returning?
I don't specifically recall that, no, sir.
Okay. But I think you would agree with me, Fabian Gonzales could not have heard what Jessica and her sister were talking about on the telephone call, could he have?
I'm going to agree, sir. Yes, sir.
Okay. And Jessica confided in her sister that Jessica was tweaking on presumably methamphetamine at the time. Do you remember that part of the conversation?
In the phone call?
Yeah.
Yes, sir.
But there's no evidence other than Jessica's testimony that she ever told Michelle or Fabian that she was using meth that day. Is that true?
Without reviewing, I know there was the defendant in his first statement to the original investigators knew that Jessica obtained methamphetamine from Martine, but without reviewing the entire transcript, I don't know if he ever mentioned the day of the murder.
Right. And in fact, her getting meth from Martine was before she got meth from the twins. Is that right?
That's correct.
All right. We'll come to that. Now, there is evidence that the defendant knew that Jessica had meth. There was a text, not the night of the murder, but the previous night. Do you remember that between him and Michelle?
I remember there's a text about that, the specific dates and time. Without refreshing my memory, I just don't know.
Well, in your, I think it would be, let's see, 358.
In his what? 358?
358?
Oh, exhibit 358?
Exhibit 358. Is this the summary activity that you that you vouched for? I guess it was yesterday, perhaps. But do you recognize that?
Yes, sir, it is.
And then there is, it's mentioned, the highlighted portion here is when they go to the giant gas station, right?
That is correct, sir.
But if we double back, I think there's a reference to a text, yes, right up here. I don't know if you can read that.
The one at 12:33 a.m. on the 23rd?
Yes, it says, hey, baby, you should do a line with us.
Yes, that's a text from the defendant to Michelle Martens.
Now, one of the things not put here is that Michelle says no.
I don't remember the...
She texted back.
I apologize. I interrupted you. I apologize.
No, and I may have interrupted you. Didn't Michelle say no to that?
There was some, I don't know the exact word no was used, but there was, she declined, is my recollection. I don't know the exact words. If you have that text, if you show it to me, it should refresh my memory.
Okay. Now, other than the testimony of Jessica, is there any evidence that Fabian had met that day or the following day?
Which day, sir?
That would be the 23rd, so we're already into the day of the murder, but from midnight of the 23rd up into the 24th when there's the domestic violence, is there any evidence that, other than what Jessica has told you, is there any evidence that the defendant took methamphetamine?
I know on that day he went to his brother Stephen's, but I believe that was for marijuana.
Right.
And there were several trips to Uncle David's, but I don't know if we ever established if or anything was purchased there.
All right, and we'll talk about that in a minute. Were you aware that, I believe it was Lieutenant Tovar, examined all three of them shortly after the police arrived? Did you know that, I think he's in the fire department, but did he examine the three defendants and give opinions about how they were functioning?
I don't know about that.
Did you know from his reports that...
Objection, hearsay.
Well, this is an expert.
He's established, he's reviewed, presented everything on the case, he can answer.
Thank you.
And just for the clarity of the record, Tovar was never tendered as an expert.
The first.
So are you aware that Fabian and Michelle seemed normal that early morning?
No, I specifically recall, I don't know if it was the fire department or at the hospital, somebody found that Michelle Martens' heart rate was way elevated, and it stayed elevated for some period of time.
But no meth was found in her system.
Objection, Your Honor, mischaracterizes the evidence and what exists in this case.
Sustained.
So you're not aware of what Tovar thought. Did you know that Jessica appeared psychotic or crazy?
I don't know if I would use those words. I've seen the video. I think everyone here has seen the video. She was clearly agitated and upset. I don't think I'm qualified to say crazy or psychotic, sir.
Right. We're not, and even Lieutenant Tovar, we're not medical people, but there appeared to be something amiss with Jessica.
Like I said, she was agitated and she was clearly upset.
And are you aware that there is a screen test at the hospital for Jessica that showed that she had over 1,000 nanograms per milliliter of meth in her system? Did you know that?
I don't believe I've ever seen that report.
Would any of that change your opinions today?
About her mental state?
Well, about whether Fabian was using methamphetamine on the day in question.
I don't think a report on Jessica would change my opinion on the defendant using drugs that day.
Well, you mentioned this morning, I believe, maybe it was yesterday, that you found syringes by Uncle David Chavez's house. Do you remember saying that?
Not by the house, but in a yard where I met to speak with him, outside his house.
Well, do you remember your interview on November 13th, 3 years ago, 2018, at Jessica Kelley's lawyer's office?
The pretrial interview?
The pretrial interview?
Yes, I remember doing that.
And on page 75, were you asked if Uncle David is messing around with drugs at all?
I remember that. I remember it wasn't him per se. I remember the impression that he was drinking in the middle of the day. He was an alcoholic. But I remember there was paraphernalia, including drug needles, all around where we were sitting.
But that's more the neighborhood, not David Chavez. Isn't that true?
I don't know.
Would you remember giving this answer?
Objection. Is there a question?
Do you remember giving this answer?
The first.
Do you remember your answer, quote, do I think Uncle David or David Chavez, he drinks a lot, so I don't have any specific information that he sells or uses drugs, but I know he drinks. Do you remember saying that?
That sounds like something, without looking at the transcript, I don't know those exact words, but I think that's what he just testified to, was that I thought I think he was drinking during the midday interview is what led me to that conclusion.
Now, didn't you, would you agree that that's not where Fabian goes to get drugs?
No, I can't agree with that. I don't know. I know one place we established for sure was his brother Stephen's residence, and I don't know that we suspected Pee-wee's, potentially Martens, and Uncle David's because of what I saw and the number of trips that were made there by the defendant.
Didn't you tell the lawyers, page 57, line 25, I don't want to say that's where Fabian goes to get drugs. Isn't that true?
Back in 2018, that might be something I've said, but I don't know, without refreshing my memory, I don't know if that's exactly what I said.
Can you give me the line number again for that, Mr. Aaron?
25?
Page 57?
Yeah.
Right. Do you have a different transcript?
I don't think so. this was,
Is this still November of 2018 or?
that might be June. Let's see. This would be November. There's a page 74.
Do you know what page? Page 74?
74.
That's a different page, hold on.
Right, right. Now,
Hold on one second, objection, Your Honor. May we approach her?
so to backtrack a little, you don't have any information that Uncle David uses drugs or sells drugs.
That is correct.
And you don't have any information that that's where Fabian gets drugs, right?
Any direct information, but we always suspected it.
Suspicion.
Correct.
But in fact, you don't have, in these past 5 years, you haven't located anyone that was selling to Fabian.
Just his brother Stephen, who supplied him with marijuana.
And that was marijuana, as you said, right?
Yes.
And in fact, Stephen admitted when you interviewed him that he did give.
Objection, Your Honor, fiercely.
Response. Let's rephrase it, assisting.
Okay. There was marijuana found at the scene of the murder, wasn't there?
Yes, sir, there was.
There was a small amount of marijuana on Fabian's nightstand, if you remember.
If I remember that, I don't know the exact location, but it was in the apartment 808.
Now, you determined that Jessica and her half-brother Willie bought methamphetamine from the twins on Sunday the 21st. Is that true?
Then the Sunday 21st after the barbecue, yes, sir.
Okay. And at that time, Fabian was at home with Michelle treating his black eye.
Without looking at to refresh my memories, I don't remember exactly when William Hollis and Jessica Kelley told us they met up with the twins. So I don't know the exact time. I just know it was in the evening of the day of the barbecue on the 21st.
And didn't the defendant leave the barbecue around 5 p.m. that evening?
That's correct, sir.
And he went home, and that's when he looked up to buy a gun, and he tried to call his brothers and things like that. Wasn't he at home when all of that happened?
No, he didn't directly go home. In fact, he was driving around and ended up at his brother Joseph's house, and then eventually ended up back at apartment 808.
But there's no indication that he was ever with Jessica and her half-brother once he left the barbecue. Isn't that true?
On the 21st, that is true.
And in fact, we have evidence that Jessica was trying to call him to get her property from her stuff from Michelle's apartment, that all of her stuff was there, and she was having an argument with Fabian. Fabian was mad at her that night, wasn't he?
Could you show me where that, I don't remember that exactly like you just described it.
So if we, did you talk to, I believe he's Lieutenant Commander, who did all of the cell location things and all of the texts?
Do you mean Kyle Hartsock?
Yes, Kyle Hartsock.
Yes, I've talked to him in the past.
So did he ever tell you in your preparation to testify that there was some exchange between Jessica and the defendant on the night in question regarding getting her stuff back?
On the night of the barbecue, or the night of the murder? I'm confused.
We're on the night of the barbecue.
Okay. Could you show me that text? That might refresh my memory.
Well, if you look at your, I believe this is 357, is this the summary? Did you prepare this summary, or did the district attorney?
District Attorney's Office.
And in this summary, we've got phone calls that he makes, and he's at his brother Joe's for just a few minutes. Then he arrives back at 8:08 on 6:46. Do you see that at the top?
I do, that's correct.
Okay. And didn't he get an 8-minute phone call from Jessica about an hour later where she wants her to get her stuff back?
I apologize. I just don't remember that part of the conversation, what they were talking about.
Well, even if we can't remember what they were talking about, isn't it true Jessica and Willie are at one location, and Fabian and Michelle are back home? Or they're certainly not with...
I know. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt.
Yeah, and I apologize. They were not with Willie and Jessica when Willie and Jessica bought drugs from the twins.
Yes, sir, that is correct.
And Willie was a person of interest for you because he was acting crazy after ingesting methamphetamine with Jessica, right?
I don't like to use the word crazy, but some of his actions were strange after leaving the barbecue and obtaining methamphetamine. For the next few days, his actions were strange and caused me concern.
And your investigation shows that both used methamphetamine at least that night, Sunday night.
Both who?
Both Jessica and Willie.
Yes, that is correct.
And Willie dropped Jessica off, I guess, at Martens that night?
Yes, that is correct.
Now, do you remember in your interviews, and you had 2 interviews with Jessica, right?
Yes, sir.
And one of them lasted all morning and a little bit of the afternoon, didn't it?
There was 2. One was, I believe, one had a morning session and an afternoon session, and then there was a follow-up session a week or 2 later.
All right. Do you remember asking Jessica, page 153, have you talked to anybody that bath salts may have been involved in this murder? Do you remember asking her that?
I don't remember it specifically, but I know bath salts came up in this investigation. I don't remember that question. It was so long ago.
Understood, but that's what I was getting at, is you were investigating the possibility that Willie and Jessica ingested methamphetamine that was laced with bath salts.
That was a rumor that showed up. We don't know where it came from, but it's something we tried to flush out.
Now, if we look at the other exhibit, which is the day of the murder. Was this prepared by the district attorney as well? And
Yes.
I'm referring to exhibit 2358.
Yes, it was.
Now, does this exhibit leave out some texts from Michelle to Jessica? I think there's a reference in here about, it would have been 4 p.m. when her bus arrives. But before that, doesn't Michelle text Jessica about 10 minutes before, for somewhere in there, don't forget to pick up Victoria? Do you remember a text like that?
There is a text like that. I don't know exactly when it is in relation to this, the actual time. If you could show me that text, it would refresh my memory.
Okay. Well, why isn't that text in your exhibit?
It's not my exhibit, sir.
Okay. Do you remember shortly after 4, a few minutes after 4, another text from Michelle to Jessica, did you pick her up? Something like that.
I'd have to review the text, sir. I don't know that those are the words. If you have the text with you, I could review it and it would refresh my memory.
Well, I don't have the text up here with me, but wouldn't that show that Michelle did contact Jessica several times related to Victoria getting off the bus? Were you aware of that?
Like I said, if I could review those texts, I don't know if there's a text back from Jessica indicating that she received them or understood them. If I could review the text, it would refresh my memory, but just what you're asking me now, I just can't give details like that without looking at the records.
Okay. And is that important to knowing what happened that afternoon?
I don't understand the question, I'm sorry.
Texts from, whether Jessica read them or not is an issue we may never know, but the fact that Michelle was texting her to pick up the child and to confirm that she did pick up the child, does that play a role in what happened?
There was also text to her parents. It was clear she and the defendant were away, not taking care of Victoria at the time, and there was text to a neighbor, parents, and Jessica. It seemed, the impression I got from Michelle Martens was panicking because she was off doing something with the defendant and not taking care of her child. That's the impression I got from those series of texts.
So your impression is that she wasn't taking care of the child, but yet she was concerned and on top of it, wasn't she?
That's not the impression I got. She was in a panic because she wasn't home to take care of her child. She was trying to find anybody to get Victoria.
Well, and didn't Fabian and her come racing home to see if Victoria can get into the house? Is she locked out? The neighbor is watching Victoria. Do you remember that whole little scene?
Yes, well after Victoria got home and she was sitting outside with nobody to take care of her.
When you say well, how many minutes are we talking about?
If you could get me those records, I can be accurate, sir.
Let me show you 358. And start at 4 p.m. That's when she got home.
So on August 23rd, 2016, at 4 p.m., Victoria's bus arrived through Arroyo Villa's apartment. At 5:05 p.m., the defendant, Michelle Martens, arrived at apartment 808.
Okay, so this indicates that they were an hour late, huh?
Correct.
Now, was Victoria with the neighbor? The neighbor was watching her?
There was a neighbor that sent Michelle Martens a text saying, "Your daughter's here looking for you." And that Victoria was waiting outside the apartment, is what I recall.
Now, were you aware that Jessica testified that she never got any of those texts and that nobody told her that she had failed to pick up the child and that there was really nothing related? There was no confrontation between Michelle and Jessica about Jessica messing up.
I wasn't present for Jessica Kelley's testimony. I don't know about that.
Okay. Did she tell you that she had no knowledge that Michelle had told her that she has to leave the apartment?
I don't specifically recall that line of questioning. If it's in the transcript of my interview with Jessica Kelley, could you please let me refresh my memory?
Well, I can't show you nothing. If it's not in there, would that refresh your memory?
As I said, sir, I don't. It was 4.5 years ago. I don't remember that line of questioning.
Now, isn't this the motive for Jessica to murder Victoria, that the spoiled kid got Jessica kicked out of the apartment?
That's whose motive?
That would be Jessica's motive to murder the little girl.
I've never heard that.
You've never heard that Jessica was told she had to leave?
No, I was told I've never heard that motive before. I don't know who said that before.
Well, I don't know that it's said. I'm asking you, isn't that a motive to kill?
I don't think so, no.
It wouldn't be among, you or I wouldn't get that angry, would we?
I would hope I wouldn't.
And you did research that there was a phone conversation where Jessica's mother was going to pick her up, but then they decided we could take you in the morning if the mother couldn't come to pick up Jessica. Do you remember that phone conversation with Jessica's mother?
There was some communication like that, I recall. I don't remember exactly when that was, though.
Okay. Now, we talked a little bit, it's hard to see on this still exactly what Jessica was wearing, but I think you'll agree that Jessica's jumpsuit ended up in the trash can.
Jessica's jumpsuit ended up in a trash can?
I'm sorry, Victoria's.
Yes, Victoria Martens, yes.
Right. Her jumpsuit ended up in the trash can, and in fact, the panties looked like they may have been soiled.
There was a dark stain on them, I recall.
Now, in your experience with murder cases, sometimes victims of strangulation do soil themselves, don't they?
Yes, that is correct.
Now, did Jessica admit to you that she washed a blanket to get urine smell out of the blanket?
I remember it was blanket, I knew it was bedding, and it was Matthew's, Victoria's younger brother's bedding. She had been sleeping off and on his bed, and apparently what I was told was Matthew had wet the bed, and so she washed the bedding.
But isn't it true, and by the way, this cloth, the blankets, if they were wet when criminalistics started going through the house, weren't they?
There was wet items in the washing machine. There was items on top of the washing machine, and there were items in the dryer when officers arrived.
Now, Jessica told you that the urine came from Matthew, Victoria's brother, right?
That's what I recall.
Did your investigation reveal that Matthew had not been in the apartment for a couple of days at least? He was not there for the Saturday sleepover, for example.
The Saturday sleepover?
Well, did you know that Jessica's 2 children and Victoria slept over at Jessica's house Saturday evening?
Saturday evening, the 20th?
It'd be the 20th, I think. Yeah, 21st was a Sunday. So between the 20th and the 21st, was there a sleepover with all 3 kids?
At Jessica Kelley's house?
No, at Michelle's house.
That I know, yes.
Okay. And so, when was the last time, if you know, that Matthew was even in his mother's house?
From the statements I remember would have been Friday the 19th into the Saturday the 20th.
That was the last day. So doesn't it strike you as odd that she would be cleaning urine out of clothing, or not clothing, but bedding, several days? I mean, if that was Friday night, we're now talking Tuesday night into Wednesday, that Jessica is washing out urine.
No, it makes sense because she would only use Matthew's bedroom when Matthew wasn't there.
Did you ever thought that maybe she was washing out Victoria's urine?
We found no information to support that.
Now, if you follow the clothes, either Jessica or this unknown man took off Victoria's soiled jumpsuit and put on pink pajamas. Is that true?
I can't agree with that. We really don't know what Victoria was wearing, or if she was wearing anything when she was murdered.
Well, didn't one of the children downstairs,
Objection hearsay.
well, it goes to his opinion, Judge.
It goes to his investigation. If you have that information, you can ask the question.
Were you aware that at least one of the...
Objection, form of the question is misleading, Judge.
Approach.
Are you aware that one of the children, Larry Hamilton, saw pink pajama bottoms, or the leg had a pink pajama bottom on it?
I remember the word pink. I don't know if I'd have to review that transcript to give you an accurate answer. I remember the pink, but I don't know if they were called pajamas by that witness. But that's when, I believe, when Victoria was being carried down the stairs at approximately 8:48 on the night of the murder.
Correct. And I believe Jessica says at some point, I don't know, did she tell you that Victoria was wearing pink pajamas when the unknown man killed her?
I just don't recall. Without reviewing both her interviews, I just don't recall.
Okay. But I think you would agree with me that there were no pink bottoms, whatever we want to call them, leggings, pajamas. That was never recovered from the scene, was it?
That is correct.
How did Jessica explain to you in your interviews why she took Victoria outside?
Could you show me that in the transcript? I don't want to give, I need to review that transcript. It's been so long.
Objection to hearsay, Judge.
I'll move on. Would you agree with me that Victoria had already been strangled before she was wrapped in a blanket and carried down the stairs? At 8:48.
8:48. Yes, she was strangled. I don't know. Yes. Yes, I'll agree with that.
Okay. Now, I'm sure you will remember this. Did the unknown man tell Jessica she should get rid of the body?
I'm really confused by that question.
What did the unknown man tell Jessica that she needed to do?
What I recall, and I'm going to paraphrase, is that the defendant had, I don't remember the exact words, made some sort of mistake, and that she needed to clean the mess up, or both of them needed to clean the mess up. And I'm paraphrasing without
Understood.
reviewing. I don't know the exact words.
So did you ever ask her, if you remember, why were you carrying Victoria's body down the stairs? Do you remember that, or asking it, or thinking it?
That sounds like something I should have asked, but could you, if you could show me the transcript, exactly what I asked, and the answer would refresh my memory.
Okay. Now, your investigation showed that usually the house is pretty neat, and there were a lot of clothes in Victoria's closet.
I don't believe I testified about clothes in a closet, but what I saw, except for the disarray at the crime scene, the house seemed appropriate, reasonably stocked with food. There was a lot of photographs of both the children. It seemed like an appropriate home with a mother and two children.
But her closet looked different than that. Didn't it look like everything was pulled off of the hangers, and there was a lot of clothes missing?
Objection. Speculative, Judge.
Response?
Well, he has said there's usually a lot of clothes in the closet.
No one said that, Judge.
Approach.
That apartment. Would you agree that at least one, maybe more than one load left that apartment before the police came?
That is my belief, yes, sir.
And that could include, of course, we don't know what left the apartment. We never found evidence from the apartment at some other location, right?
That is correct, sir.
And I think only the two dumpsters right outside were searched, not other dumpsters farther away. Is that right?
I believe the two closest dumpsters to the apartment 808 were searched that morning.
Okay. And it's possible that clothes were underneath the body when things were done to it. That's one explanation for the missing blood, right?
I don't know that I can make that leap. I know blood was cleaned up. It's very obvious. Could clothes have been used to soak up blood? That's a possibility, yes, sir.
Okay. And I believe Ms. Kelley's talked about some sort of trash bags that we used underneath. Those are gone, right?
Well, there's a total of 3 of those white kitchen trash bags that we recovered. Of course, the one that Victoria's limbs and other items were in, there's one underneath that, and there's a folded one near Matthew's bedroom that we found. So there's a total of 3 that we found at the scene.
But we're missing, thousands of milliliters of blood that aren't in the apartment, right?
Yes, that was always a question that the investigative team had, was we thought there should have been more blood at the scene.
And this pink pajamas or pink bottoms, those are missing, right?
We never established there was even there was one statement from a scene witness about something pink, and then Jessica Kelley talked about it. But no, we never found any pink like pajamas at the scene. That's correct, sir.
And did Michelle Martens mention it as well?
I just don't remember. Could you show me that in her transcript? And that might refresh my memory.
Perhaps on redirect. Now, do you agree with Commander Hartsock, that the cell phone activity for Jessica dropped while the activity for Fabian and Michelle were normal-ish for the night in question?
I can tell you that based on the records, during the later evening of the night on the 23rd of the murder, there was some Facebook activity involving the defendant and Michelle Martens. Without reviewing all those transcripts that Commander Hartsock's talking about, I don't know exactly. There were calls made by Jessica Kelley where she's speaking with her mother. I think some of those may even be on that exhibit, but I don't know. It's hard for me to answer for Commander Hartsock.
Okay. Now, if Jessica turned her phone off, then we can't track where she went. Isn't that true?
If someone turns their phone off, we would normally expect that we cannot pick up signals from that phone that we could track.
And other than 3 data points, calling Lori, her twice, and her sister, I believe she called once, other than those 3 data points, we don't know what or where Jessica was or what she was doing.
Even without those data points as you're calling, I don't know that we could really say, I wasn't in the apartment, what exactly anyone was doing there. We can just tell the positives when someone's either on Facebook or making calls. I can't really tell you what the 3 people in that apartment were doing at any given time unless we have some sort of positive evidence for that, if that makes sense.
Wasn't it unusual for Jessica to turn off her phone?
Objection, Your Honor. Mischaracterizes the evidence. There's no evidence she turned off her phone.
Mr. Earl?
Doesn't Commander Hartsock's report indicate that there's a downward spike, that there's no activity at all for Jessica, and that's unlike her baseline?
I don't know what Commander Hartsock testified to or what he's reporting. I have no way of knowing who or who did not turn their phone on and off on that night.
Now, Fabian, his activity, he accepted a friend request from a this is a former girlfriend or somebody he had seen. Remember that?
Was that Alicia
Aragon.
Yes, at one point during that night.
And he tells her she needs to get off drugs and maybe they can get back together, so he's talking.
Objection, Your Honor. Mischaracterizes the evidence. Can we approach the court?
So the text about you need to get off drugs and maybe we can get back together, that was 2 days earlier than the night in question, right?
I remember something like that. I don't remember the exact date and time. If you could show me that text, that would refresh my memory.
Okay. Now, that night, you do remember, though, that Fabian is texting Alicia, come on over here and stuff like that, right?
Yes, he was demanding that Alicia come to apartment 808.
And she didn't really take that seriously. I mean, there's no evidence
Objection,
that she
Your Honor.
came. Is there?
Mischaracterizing the evidence. Can we approach?
If she even was responding to these texts or if she received them that night, right?
I know there was communications. I don't remember if they were text or Facebook messaging. I know when I spoke with her, she did not go over to the apartment.
Right. But, and then there's Facebook activity by the defendant. I think you explained some of those where you backed up 6 hours and everything.
Yes, sir.
Don't you think that if you're involved in dismembering a body, that
Objection. Calls for speculation.
I'll let you finish the question.
that texting and Facebooking and liking somebody's picture or something, that's not real consistent with what you're saying he was doing that night, is it?
Overruled. You can answer.
There's a long period of time between 8:48 and when all of this Facebooking and messaging is going on. There's a period of time in between where we don't see that, and afterwards till around 4:34 when we have the 911 call. I don't know what was going on exactly at what exact time, so I don't really think I have an opinion on what could have been going on when the defendant was on the Facebook and when he was messaging.
Well, do you agree with Commander Hartsock that this was normal-ish behavior for defendant's baseline activity?
That's Commander Hartsock's opinion.
What's your opinion?
I don't know that I have enough data to form, I think we had 6 postings on all the records that were requested. I don't know that you can form an opinion. I would want to look at, if I was doing it, weeks to see what was normal for the defendant.
Now, as I understand it, the person that, or people, removed the heart and half of the liver from the body of Victoria. Is that your understanding?
So my understanding was there was a large wound essentially from her neck down. There was a portion of her sternum removed, a portion of liver and the heart was removed.
Now, you had a local psychologist and a New York psychiatrist examine Michelle Martens, is that right?
Dr. Wellner, the psychiatrist, he examined Michelle Martens. I don't remember Pt.3 interviewing her. Is that what you're asking me?
I thought there was another name, but let's stick with Dr. Wellner. Had you ever thought to have someone examine Jessica Kelley to see if she has mental illness?
That was not something I was a part of, discussions I was a part of.
What was her explanation to you in your 2 interviews for why?
Objection, hearsay.
Finish the question.
As to why the heart and liver were removed?
Overruled. I'm sorry. Do you have another objection?
No, you're right.
Overruled.
Could you show me in the transcripts where I specifically asked her about that? I don't remember her specific response.
Did you ever ask her?
I just don't recall. Could you show me the transcripts? And by reading those transcripts, I'll be able to refresh my memory.
Did she tell you that it looked like someone else did it? To make it look like someone else did it?
Objection, hearsay.
Would it surprise you if Jessica Kelley testified that Fabian Gonzales told her to do this, to make it look like someone else did it? Referring to removing organs and cutting into the chest.
I don't want to comment or say it surprises me. It does surprise me what Jessica Kelley testified to here.
Well, is that consistent with your investigation of what she was saying?
And I apologize, since Jessica Kelley was going to testify, I didn't spend a lot of time on her 2 interviews I did with her. They were several years ago. If you could please show me that transcript where we talked about that, that would refresh my memory.
Does that make sense to you that you would remove organs to make it look like someone else did it?
The removal of the organs in this case just doesn't make a lot of sense. Period.
Do you think that whoever was removing limbs and organs, they were trying to make the body lighter?
Through my training experience, dismemberment of humans, including children, of the arms and legs is sometimes done for ease of disposal.
Okay.
The evisceration, removing the organs, I've never heard of that for ease of disposal. It just makes things really messy.
It's crazy, isn't it, to not use that word, but it's bizarre.
This was strange. I'll give you that.
Now, when you say ease of disposal, dead weight is very hard to carry, isn't it?
From people I've talked to involved in that, moving a deceased human being is difficult.
But doesn't that suggest this was a one-person job, not a two?
I don't have an opinion on that. I can't say either way.
Now, did your investigation reveal that Fabian and Jessica argued on the balcony that night?
I don't know if we can say it's an argument. There was conversations. I believe a witness downstairs heard them talking about, and again, I'm paraphrasing unless I can see the transcript, what were they going to do or something like that.
Well, wasn't it they were arguing about her having to leave in the morning? And that she was acting weird?
I remember the conversation from the witness that they were discussing what were they going to do. That's what I recall.
Now, doesn't the crime scene look like it was unfinished? The body wasn't removed, the organs weren't removed, the arms weren't removed. There was never the whatever they or she was doing wasn't done. Would you agree with that?
As I testified yesterday, it seemed to me when I started looking at the case there was two different times or crime scenes. One appeared to be relatively smooth, where there was substantial cleanup. Law enforcement and neighbors weren't alerted. We suspect things left the apartment, and then there was the close to the 911 call where it was completely different. It was the panic. So, as you said, there were still items that we believe were supposed to leave the apartment, and then Jessica Kelley panicking and lighting Victoria on fire.
Well, let's stick with the first part. Were you aware that at least one television was on that evening?
There was a lot of questions. We looked at the televisions. It looked like one was on because we could see, I can't remember if it was Matthew's or Victoria's bedroom, but the overall photograph showed, I believe, like a number in the bottom, like it was on, but there was no program playing when the officers or when the photographs were taken. The others, I just don't recall. I can see the photographs, and that's all I remember about the TV sets.
Do you remember if the television in the living room was open, or was on?
Without reviewing the crime scene report or the initial photographs, or perhaps the lapel video, that might refresh my memory.
If I may approach. Handing you Exhibit B.
Thank you.
Is that a still from the first responders?
It looks like lapel video from one of the officers.
And does the television look on in the top right?
It's hard to tell, but that does look like it possibly is a television that's on. There's flashlights going. The lapel video may clear that up.
Wouldn't that indicate that Jessica was trying to keep the people in the master bedroom from knowing what she was doing?
I don't know. I don't have an opinion on that.
Okay. You do agree that Jessica put the red shirt on the body. Is that right?
Without reviewing, as I said, I was not here for her testimony. Without reviewing my two interviews with her, I don't remember if she told us that she did that.
Well, would you agree that the red shirt was found on the body?
Yes, around the neck, yes.
Wasn't completely on, was it?
No, sir, it was not.
Now, did you notice in your review of the DNA reports from Florida that the red shirt had 4
Objection.
male markers?
Hearsay, Your Honor.
Approach, we're going to take a break after.
Detective Lewis, you're always, once a detective, always a detective.
I understand, thank you, I appreciate the courtesy.
Were you aware, would it surprise you that the DLI, the DNA people out of Florida, they found 4 male markers on the red shirt?
I know there's a there's a mixed profile on the red shirt. I know there's some confusion on how many on Victoria's back, how many on the shirt. But if you're telling me there's 4, that's what's in the report, I'll believe you.
Okay. And this is the shirt we're talking about, Exhibit R, that was found on Victoria at the time of her death.
Yes, sir.
And I think you'll agree with me that the back, one of the back swabs had at least 2, and the other had at least 4 male markers. Is that right?
There's locations on Victoria's back that have mixed profiles that have multiple contributors. Without review, I want to review the report because I don't want to get things wrong for the jury. But there was a number of contributors to this mixed male profile located on Victoria's back.
And and Fabian was excluded from the 4 by the state crime lab that they.
Objection, Your Honor. Those are different labs.
So let's keep it the DLI or the state lab, just for clarity purposes.
Okay. So are you, would it surprise you that that Ms. Archuleta, the state DPS, Department of Public Safety crime lab, she was of the opinion that the defendant was excluded from
Objection,
those.
Your Honor. She didn't compare it to the mixture from Florida.
Let me finish the question and just don't answer yet. Can you state the question again?
Were you aware that the state crime lab excluded the defendant from the back swabs?
One second. Any objection to that question?
Yes, Your Honor. I think it needs to be clarified as to which profile he's asking was compared, because the beginning of the question started with the results from Florida. Now he's asking about exclusion from the state.
So just the state lab?
Just the state lab.
You can answer.
Yes, ma'am. If I understand correctly, what I know from the state lab, there was a partial male or Y profile that was detected on Victoria's back, and that was suitable for one-on-one comparison. That YSTR or male profile, the defendant has been excluded as being a contributor to.
All right. Now, did you know that Jessica did not take a bath or a shower on Tuesday?
No, I did not know that.
Did you know she was, I believe you do know this because you looked at the school record, she was an active girl and often going to the school nurse, bruising her knees and elbows.
I'm completely lost. You asked me the last question if Jessica took a bath on Tuesday.
Did I say Jessica? I apologize. Did you know that Victoria did not take a bath on Tuesday?
Which Tuesday? I'm sorry, which Tuesday would that be?
The last day of her life.
The day of her murder on the 23rd. I don't have any information about that.
Did you know that Victoria was an active girl and bruising her knees and going to the school nurse?
I reviewed her APS records. I can tell you there was nothing in that current school year, even though it was short. I reviewed back to, I think, 2014, and APS is very good about documenting sick calls. There was times when she had a cold, a headache. I remember times when she's on the monkey bars and her back of her leg hurt. I think there was a time where she bruised a knee or something like that. It sounds just like my kids when they were going to school.
just like a normal 10-year-old, pretty active. Would you agree?
I would agree. She's a normal kid.
And she passed out cupcakes at school on Tuesday, didn't she?
I don't know if she did it. I know there was a birthday party for her, and there was cupcakes.
Did you know that she was inviting just about everyone in the neighborhood there to her birthday party the next day?
I didn't. I know there was a birthday party upcoming. I didn't know that she was inviting, as you said, everyone in the neighborhood.
You're aware that there were unknown mail prints found on other items, for example, those little CDs that have movies on them, other places in the house?
Objection to the form of question as far as mail prints? I don't know.
Mail DNA, mail markers.
Could you please repeat?
There were unidentified mail markers found elsewhere in the house, weren't there?
There was unidentified Y profiles detected on various pieces of evidence at the scene. That is correct.
Now, you collected DNA swab from Matthew, her brother, Victoria's brother.
I had them collected by law enforcement out of state.
And did you collect any more, or were any more DNA swabs collected from juvenile males?
They were all adult males.
Okay. Would it surprise you that the Florida lab expert testified that the amount of female DNA when quantifying on the fingernails, the neck, the back, were thousands of...
Objection, Your Honor. We're talking about quantification, that's not an evidence?
I believe we entered the exhibit. And that's all right.
Come on up, I think I know what you're asking.
DNA on the body in Florida.
Yes.
I don't remember any conversations I was involved in where I was worried about whether it was male or female. I was just looking for DNA to figure out who was involved. It's the best way I can answer that, sir.
Well, based on your experience over years with DNA in murder cases, shouldn't we have looked for Jessica's DNA on the body?
Objection, Your Honor. There's testimony that those tests were run by the state lab.
Any further questions, sustained?
Did you understand that the reason that the Florida lab was hired was because they have state-of-the-art equipment, tests?
That was one of the reasons, was they could do more testing than the state DPS lab.
Didn't you want more testing that could show whether a female committed the crime on a
Objection,
female?
Your Honor. This is misleading.
You can answer the question, overruled.
I'm sorry, one more time, please, sir.
I had forgotten myself. Wouldn't it have been helpful if we're going to hire Florida that they should have looked for female on female DNA?
Well, those tests have been done for a while at the state DPS lab. It's my understanding that Florida had testing that may be able to enhance or detect the Y profiles to try and explain those. There had been when I sent a request off to a lab to process whatever piece of evidence is, I don't ask, hey, look for male or female. So all the original requests that went up to the state DPS lab, and there was many of those, it said, please process for DNA. We don't ask, look for what are female or male. We just ask for DNA. So I think those testings that you were asking about had been done long before we tried to use Florida to help explain what we were seeing.
So weren't you sort of having tunnel vision that you're looking for this other man and you're not concerned about Jessica anymore?
I don't think so, no, sir. I don't agree with that.
Okay. Would it surprise you that Jessica testified that police planted evidence in the orange laundry basket?
I don't know what she would testify to.
Was there anything in your investigation that would suggest that the police messed up the crime scene?
First you had planted, then messed up. I don't
Well,
under.
Did your investigation suggest any police problems in how they handled the crime scene?
And I apologize. What do you mean by problems?
I mean, putting her purse in an orange laundry basket.
I have no information that any officer placed her purse into an orange laundry basket. No, sir, I do not.
And in fact, these are highly trained people that know the importance of preserving the evidence so that we can analyze it. Would you agree with that?
You mean the responding officers and the subsequent detectives?
Exactly.
Yes, I will agree with that.
Do you have any reason to believe the police overlooked methamphetamine in a light fixture?
I recall well into this, maybe in 2019, going back out to 808, and it was, I believe, the master bedroom light fixture to check that there might be evidence behind that. This is 3 years, I believe, afterwards. I did not find any. I found that light fixture easily comes off the wall. Unfortunately, that apartment had been entered. Things had been changed, moved. So I don't really know what could not have been missed on that day.
Now, were you aware that just a couple of days after there was a report of possible drugs that turned out to be, I think it was detergent or something. Did you know about that?
Yes, I believe the grandparents went out there and they saw kind of a white powder, and out of concern, our detectives obtained a new search warrant and went back out just out of concern to make sure nothing was missed.
I think it was the day of, but didn't they find some paper in the second bathroom, the bathroom where Victoria was found, that's consistent with something that would have meth in it? Some paraphernalia.
Not paper. I remember a drug pipe fashioned out of aluminum foil.
Okay. Yeah, and it's like silver paper, and I guess you use it somehow to smoke.
I've seen you can smoke pretty much any drug you want out of there, from fentanyl to marijuana. You just you roll it up tight, and a little cup on it, and you place your drug in it, light it, and then you can inhale the vapors.
And that was found in the, not in the master bedroom or bath, but it was found in the children's bathroom.
There was one that was documented in the master bathroom on the windowsill, and there was another one on the second search, I believe the 26th, that was photographed on the floor after the trash was emptied. And that was in the hallway bathroom.
You mentioned that nobody saw Fabian fix Michelle's window motor in the parking lot. Do you remember that testimony?
Yes, I do.
Isn't it true that Pauline Quintana spoke to Fabian while he was fixing the window?
I don't recall that offhand.
Would you agree that the window was, that Fabian was fixing Michelle's window before the kids got home from school?
That was in the afternoon before Victoria got off the bus at 4 p.m. Yes, sir.
Now, when Victoria was murdered, there were a lot of people outside, weren't there?
It depends on how you say a lot, but there were 3 children. There was an adult male in a vehicle, and there was other adults in the area, yes.
Did you review the note and report of Denise de los Santos, one of the 4 children that were outside?
Did I review a note?
Well, yeah, I think she wrote a little police statement, handwritten.
Oh, her statement?
Yeah.
I'm sure I've read it in the course of the investigation. It doesn't really pop out in my mind. If you have that, I can refresh my memory.
Well, isn't it true that, I believe you testified that nobody saw the unknown man?
Which unknown man?
The unknown man that Jessica says killed Victoria.
That's my investigation showed that, yes.
Now, in your opinion, Michelle did not know that her daughter was dead before the police told her.
I don't know if I have developed an opinion on that. That's been a discussion for years. So I don't know for a certainty whether she knew or did not know before the first officers arrived.
If Michelle did not know, is it possible that Fabian did not know?
I don't know. That's just me guessing and speculating.
Okay. Were you aware that Jessica stole their cell phones that night at some point? Or took them?
Took them. There was some statements by both the defendant and Michelle Martens that sometime during the incident, closer to the 911 call, that she came into the master bedroom, said something, and then took some cell phones.
And I think, were they found in her purse, the cell phones, or I remember seeing them spread out later, but
I remember the photographs at the crime lab. Without looking at the major crime scene report, I don't want to give incorrect information. I know they were collected inside 808.
all right. Would it surprise you if Jessica testified that she thought Fabian and Michelle were laying on top of the bed sheets in the master bedroom, laughing about Jessica?
At what point?
As she's coming in with an iron.
I hadn't heard that before.
She doesn't, you don't recall her telling you that in your interviews.
Page number, Mr. Martin?
It was never said.
May we approach him?
She was going to murder them as witnesses.
Them, you mean the defendant, Michelle Martens?
Yes.
That doesn't surprise me.
Based on your investigation, your interview with Jessica Kelley, was she collecting the CDs and the phones as things she could barter later on?
I remember a line of questioning, but I don't remember the exact. I remember that something to the effect that she was getting the CDs to sell for money down the road.
Now, you just agreed, I think, that Jessica admitted that she wanted to kill the witnesses and also to burn down the house. Is that your understanding, the apartment?
I don't know if I agreed to that. I don't know if that line of questioning ever came up during my 2 interviews about that she intended to kill the defendant and Michelle Martens. There was conversation about the arson, yes.
Okay.
But without reviewing that entire interview, I don't want to give incorrect information.
Now, your investigation revealed that there was an initial fight in the master bedroom. Isn't that true? That's where it broke out?
According to statements by the defendant and then I believe by Michelle Martens later on down the road, that the incident that led to the 911 call at 4:34 a.m. began in the bedroom and then progressed through the the apartment out into the kitchen area.
Now, did your investigation show that there was a lull or kind of a break where it was intense and then it settled down and then it got intense again?
Depending on which witness you talk to, it wasn't a long break. I don't want the jury to be misunderstood. There may have been a slight lull, but there wasn't like this hours-long break in between the disturbance that led to the 911 call.
Now, during that break, was it your understanding that Fabian started to clean up Michelle's blood in the kitchen with a rag?
Fabian provided some information to original investigators that he was cleaning up.
And he was trying to, he didn't want the police called or anything at that moment. Isn't that true?
I don't know what Mr. Gonzales was thinking at that
Okay.
time.
But I think you'll agree the fight escalated again. It started up again.
It may have ebbed and flowed, but I don't think there was like this huge break in it. I think there was
Shorter break.
an issue going on, and it just flowed.
Now, it's at that point, is it your understanding that Fabian grabbed the iron and threw it out the window?
Threw it off the
balcony.
The balcony. That's correct. Threw it off the balcony and ended up in the bushes below the balcony.
And then he ran and asked neighbors to call the police. Is that true?
The defendant, Michelle Martens, ended up at apartment 407, and that we summoned the police. That is true.
In all your murder investigations, have you ever heard of someone calling the police knowing that there's a dead body upstairs?
I can't think of one of mine, but yes, we've had, especially domestics, where the surviving partner will call us when, of course, their spouse or a loved one they've just murdered. So it's really not that uncommon.
Now, you testified yesterday on direct that you thought that the defendant had told the officers that he had cleaned up his fingernails, I believe you said. Is that what your testimony was?
Yes, there's a point during his interview where it's a female detective, I can't remember who it was, talked about cleaning up, showering, and fingernails, and he indicated that he had cleaned his fingernails.
Isn't it true that Detective Gonterman repeatedly asked the defendant if they were going to find DNA on Victoria, if they were going to find his DNA on Victoria?
I know that question was asked of the defendant. I don't remember which. There was a number of detectives, including a number of female detectives, that questioned the defendant the day of the murder. The subject of would his DNA be found on Victoria was brought up.
And in fact, there was never a statement by the defendant that he
Objection.
cleaned his hands. Isn't that true?
Ooh. Withdrawn.
I'm sorry, could you ask again, please?
The defendant never said that he had cleaned his hands to Detective Gonterman, did he?
To Detective Gonterman, I don't remember if it was her, but he talks about washing up. I remember that. The exact words, we'd have to pull the transcript out to get that, but he talks about washing up.
Well, we'll wait for that exact transcript. Isn't it true that the criminalistics detective Pisano testified? Well, let's go to that. Let's stay with Gonterman. On page 240, isn't it true that Detective Gonterman told him, you stabbed her, you stabbed somebody, And Mr. Gonzales' answer, what, you're saying I stabbed somebody? And Gotterman says, I can tell from what I just saw in your hands, because blood, I don't care how much you washed it, it doesn't go away. And Mr. Gonzales says, wash it? You're saying I stabbed somebody? And Gotterman says, Fabian, okay then there. And Mr. Gonzales, really? And Detective Gotterman, okay, so one. And Mr. Gonzales says, I know I grabbed the iron like that, and it was bloody. Would you agree with me the defendant never admitted to washing his hands in that exchange?
Could I read, that's a
Yeah,
real long portion. If I could take a look at that transcript?
What page?
This will be page 240, line 12.
Begin with line 12.
It's highlighted.
Thank you. So line 12 starts out, Detective Gonnerman, you stabbed her, period. You stabbed someone, period. Mr. Gonzales, what, question mark? You're saying I stabbed someone, question mark? Detective Gonnerman then stated, I can tell from what I just saw on your hands, because bloods, I don't care how much you wash it, it doesn't go away. Wash it, comma, you're saying I stabbed someone. Fabian, I'm sorry, Detective Gotterman, Fabian, okay, then there. Mr. Gonzales says really as in a question mark. Detective Gotterman replies, okay, so one. Mr. Gonzales replies, I know I grabbed the iron like that and it was bloody. So the best to answer your question, I don't think he ever denies that he didn't wash anything or says I did wash anything in this little excerpt we're looking at.
Well, at least in that excerpt, isn't he denying that any of that is true, that he stabbed someone or that he washed his hands? He's not admitting he did any of that. Would you agree with that?
Nobody doesn't deny that he stabbed anyone.
He asks her, you're saying that I stabbed someone?
Correct. He says what? You're saying I stabbed one. Detective Gotterman responded, I can tell from what I just saw in your hands, because blood, I don't care how much you wash it, it doesn't go away. The defendant, Mr. Gonzales, replied, wash it. You're saying I stabbed somebody? Question mark. Detective Gotterman responded, Fabian, okay, then there. Mr. Gonzales said, really, as in a question. Detective Gotterman responded, okay, so one. And Mr. Gonzales stated, I know I grabbed the iron like that and it was bloody. So I don't, based on this little excerpt right here, there is no admission or denial that I can get out of this conversation.
All right, let's look at, I think it's the next page, 143.
You're on 240.
Let's go back to 143. Is that the only other time there's reference to fingernails or washing?
Could I have, this starts in the middle of either a question or answer. Could I have the page before to get the...
Sure, here's 142.
Okay, thank you. So I'll start with, on page 142, line 16. Actually, I'll start with line 13. Detective Church, his question is, any reason I'm going to find any of your DNA in her fingernails from her fighting with you or scratching you? Mr. Good.
Your Honor, I'm going to object to hearsay in just reading this transcript.
Well, Judge, they've made an allegation that the So your investigation shows that the officers interrogating the defendant thought that they would find either his DNA on her, on Victoria, or Victoria's DNA on Mr. Gonzales. Is that right?
You mean the investigating detectives during the interview
Right.
with the defendant? There's a line of questioning from different detectives that I recall that they were trying to asked the defendant if there was going to be DNA transfer from either him to the victim or victim or him. There was a lot of questioning like that.
And he denied that they would find anything and said...
Objection, hearsay?
The president is hearsay just to the course of the investigation, so avoiding the hearsay. Rephrase the question, sustained?
In the course of your investigation, the defendant only accused Jessica that if they were going to find something...
Objection, hearsay?
Let me rephrase.
Sustained?
The defendant never... well, would you agree with me that in the end they didn't find her DNA on him and they didn't find his DNA on her?
That is correct.
Now, one of the problems with this interview is that the detectives thought the murder took place around the time of the assault. Is that true?
I really can't tell you what those detectives thought the problem was or when they thought the murder occurred.
Well, do you remember the detectives telling him that people heard the girl screaming at that time?
I remember there was some conversation about a witness hearing someone screaming. Could you show me that transcript of that portion, please, so I could refresh my memory?
No, I can't. Do you remember them believing that neighbors heard the girl screaming?
Who is them?
The police, the detectives that were asking him questions. Detective Akata, Detective Garnered.
So you're asking me if Detective Akata and Goderman believed the witnesses about the screaming?
If they told Fabian that neighbors heard the girl screaming related to the domestic violence.
I don't remember that specifically. If it's in the transcript, if I could review it, please.
Do you remember if the detectives told Fabian that Michelle said she saw the body being moved?
Again, I remember something like that, but I don't have any specific recollection of who asked it and what was actually said. The transcript would help me refresh my memory.
Do you recall before the defendant claimed to have seen Jessica stabbing Victoria to death that he...
Objection, hearsay.
Take the question again, let me hear it again, Mr. Ernst.
Before the defendant claimed that he saw Jessica stabbing the child in the middle, isn't it true that there was concerns that if he didn't, he was guilty?
Overruled.
I apologize. I don't understand. I don't understand what you're asking me.
Didn't the officers pressure Fabian to say something more than he didn't know how the child was killed?
I know that the the investigating detectives who were interviewing Fabian pressured him.
Right.
Pressured him during the long interview. Yes, that is correct.
And he thought if he didn't give something up, he was automatically
Objection,
guilty.
hearsay?
Speculation, sustained.
And Your Honor, may we approach?
Do you think the officers acted inappropriately in those pressures that you talked about?
There was a very long interview with Mr. Gonzales, the defendant. There was some parts of the interview that I don't think I would use. They're taught and they're legal. You can tell a defendant untruths, and you can play one defendant against the other, saying they're talking. I don't know if I have an opinion about whether it was appropriate or whether it worked or didn't. I've used them in the past. I don't use them, or I haven't used them before I retired a whole lot toward the end.
Well, would you agree that the investigation got a little off track because Michelle had said things that turned out not to be true, and those were used in the interview of the defendant to get him to agree to those things?
I don't remember him agreeing to any of those things, but yes, some of the information that was not true from Michelle Martens was used during the questioning of the defendant.
Now, was there one thing that neither the investigators, the detectives who were interviewing him, nor he never mentioned in his 9-hour interview? Was there something that everyone left out?
I apologize, I don't know what you're asking.
Fair enough. I'm being a little too... nobody thought that another man did it, did they? Nobody mentioned that an unknown man murdered the child.
I don't know what those detectives were thinking at that time.
Well, did they say anything that suggested maybe somebody else did it instead of the 3 adults who were there?
There was one point of questioning I recall where they were questioning the defendant about, it was either semen or sperm that was located on Victoria's midsection, I believe. And the defendant denied that he was involved in anything like that. And then they said something like, well, you're the only man in there. And that's what I recall when, that was one of the things that triggered me during my initial interview, was they were getting there. If that makes sense how I answered it.
I understand, but Fabian, I think you'll agree, he allowed himself to be interviewed for 9 hours because he was trying to...
Objection, speculation.
I agree, I'll rephrase.
Rephrase it, sustain.
Fabian never said, hey, according to Jessica, somebody else killed Victoria while Michelle and I were away. That was never said.
I don't remember anything in that initial interview where the defendant said anything like that.
And based on your investigation, the only reason Fabian did not give up the unknown man is because Jessica never
Objection,
told him.
speculation.
Rephrase the question, sustain.
Can you think of any reason why Fabian wouldn't have blamed it on the other man?
I can think of many. Revenge on his family, revenge on himself. It was a close friend, a relative. There could be a number of reasons that the defendant wouldn't have told us.
Isn't one of the reasons that he was as clueless as Michelle about how it happened?
I don't think he was clueless. No, I don't agree with that, sir.
That's not a possibility?
Totally clueless about the incident? No, sir, I don't agree with that.
The cell location records, from those, you were able to eliminate Michelle Martens and Fabian Gonzales from being there when Victoria was killed. Is that right?
Yes, sir.
And the whole 9 hours was about him being there while Victoria was killed.
No, there's much more.
Now, you're of a firm opinion that there's another man or men that were somehow involved in this. Is that correct?
Yes, based on the scientific evidence, yes.
And you did a lot of work looking for Lacote, right?
Yes, sir.
Did you ever wonder, how did she know his nickname if she didn't know who he was?
I'd just be guessing it.
Okay. Well, in fact, your opinion is she knows who the man or men were.
I don't have anything to firmly base that on, but yes, I believe people involved in this know who this is.
I think you will agree with the arson experts that Jessica was the one who set fire to the body.
Yes, I believe Jessica did do that, yes.
You wired Jessica's cell pod twice?
Yes.
Did she say Fabian would die for pretending that he saw her stabbing the child to death?
Objection, reference from Mr. Ahrens, please.
What is this from, Mr. Ernst?
This is from one of the 2 cell pod interviews.
Which one?
The one we went over with her.
The second or the 29th?
I believe it was the first, but I don't know. I don't have a reference.
Do you need a moment, Ms. Gilman?
Please, Your Honor. You believe it's from the 29th?
That's my guess. I'll move on to try to get this,
Okay.
because I'm almost done. Now, 2 years after the murder, Jessica gave you a statement in connection with what was ultimately the plea agreement that was introduced into evidence.
Objection, Your Honor. We've already litigated this.
Say the question again.
Jessica Kelley, you interviewed Jessica Kelley a couple of times, and it was in contemplation of a plea agreement.
Objection, Your Honor. Objection, foundation.
We
Basically
need to
not.
make sure this witness is aware of the plea.
Are you aware of the plea agreement with Jessica Kelley?
Generally, that she pled guilty. I don't know the details of it.
So you don't know if things ran concurrent or consecutive or any of that?
No, that's not part of my assignment or job.
Okay. Did Jessica ever admit to you that there was one or more run with the evidence, that some of the evidence left the house at some point?
I don't specifically recall that line of questioning. If that's in one of the transcripts, could I please refresh my memory?
Well, I didn't see it, but I was wondering if you remembered it.
If it's not in the transcript, sir, I did not ask it, or it did not come up.
Well, do you remember asking Jessica this question during your interview, page 92?
Which interview?
It was the one in September of 2018.
Are you talking about Jessica's interview or the detective?
Yes, during Jessica's interview, page 92, line 21. Help me understand why, if Fabian doesn't know what he did, and he obviously not involved in the death of the little girl because he's not there, that portion of it, why doesn't he just leave if he doesn't know what he did? Do you remember asking that question?
That was my question?
Right.
Not specifically.
But today, as you look at this case, aren't you perplexed if he didn't know about this other man, as she says, why he didn't just leave?
Did Jessica say that Fabian didn't know about him?
She did. That was her answer. I don't know.
Doesn't know why Fabian didn't. Could I review that? I'm totally confused at this point, sir.
Yeah. It's question 63.
Okay, thank you.
I'm quoting.
This is not my transcript?
No, it's not your transcript.
Could I review my transcript and make sure it's accurate, please?
You can on redirect. but I don't have your transcript in front of me.
I don't know how to answer it. I don't know if it's out of context or.
Well, I'm not trying to hold you to what you said there. What I'm asking you is today, as you take this stand, aren't you perplexed why, if Fabian didn't know this unknown man, why he didn't just leave?
So the hypothetical to me is if the defendant didn't know this man, why didn't he just leave at what point in the incident?
Well, at the point where he finds out that there's a dead body, that somebody else killed this little kid, didn't you think he would just leave unless he knew this man?
I don't ever thought about it, but I think, as we sit here today, based on my investigation, I think he was involved, and I think he does know who it is, and I think that's why he helped clean up.
Would it surprise you that Jessica testified that he acted like he didn't know?
Objection, here's the, I'll withdraw, Judge, I'm sorry.
You can ask the question.
I don't know what
Isn't what Jessica told you and what she's telling the jury is that when she told Fabian that this man said it's Fabian's fault, that he didn't understand what she was talking about.
I wasn't here for Jessica's testimony in this courtroom, so I don't know what she testified to. It's impossible for her to answer that question.
But it's not impossible for you to answer the question of what she told you when you interviewed her.
It was two long interviews. I'm not trying to be difficult. I'm just really trying to understand what you're asking me.
Well, I guess I'm asking you, why did you ask Jessica, why didn't Fabian just leave?
Because I'm trying to get to the truth. That's why I ask every question.
Okay. So it certainly crossed your mind that it doesn't make, her story doesn't make sense, does it?
I'm not going to agree with that statement, no.
Now, you said it was asked on direct, is it possible Jessica did all of this yourself? And you said, only if you're blind to the physical evidence. Do you remember saying that?
That's, I don't remember the exact answer, but it sounds like.
Okay. And you said something about her jumping out of the window. Didn't she blame Lacote for pushing her out of the balcony?
I think on the lapel video, when the officers first contact her, she walks around. She tries to make that statement, and one of the officers calls her out on it right away.
In your murder investigations, have you ever heard of a hitman leaving a witness behind?
I don't believe I've ever had a quote-unquote hitman murder investigation that I've done. So I can't answer that question. I don't think I've ever had a quote-unquote hitman murder investigation.
Okay. Is that what your theory is in this case, that somebody was asked to come and do what he did?
You mean who, to murder Victoria?
Well, he ended up murdering Victoria, right.
As I sit here today, there is still a variety of possibilities. Was it just simple that Jessica and an unknown male were just smoking drugs and something went wrong? Was it as a result of the barbecue and the threats that the defendant made against Amanda and DeAngelo? I don't have a specific theory at this point. I just don't have enough information.
Can you rule out the theory that it was just Jessica?
I think, again, you'd have to just ignore all the physical evidence. And I've learned over many years, follow your evidence, follow the evidence.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
were asked if, oh, grab my microphone, sorry.
Detective Lewis, you were asked a question about Jessica Kelley's statement to you, and you were asked a number of questions, but the first one we're going to talk about is you were directed to page 92, line 21 of her September statement. I'm going to show you that page and ask that you read on into page 93 to complete her answer. So, page 92, line 21 begins here with you, and if you'll just read down to where she actually did answer your question.
Yes, ma'am. So on page 92, starting on line 21, I'm asking the question, so help me understand why, if Fabian doesn't know what he did, and he's obviously not involved in the death of the little girl because he's not there, that portion of it, why doesn't he just leave if he doesn't know who did it? Does that, let me scroll, and Miss Kelley states in the middle of my does that, she says, I don't know.
And continue.
Okay. Line 2 on the next page is I ask a question, all I'm asking, and then Jessica Kelley responds, yeah, I understand, but maybe because he really thought I did it, or maybe he knew about something was going to happen, you know what I mean.
It seems like the two of you might have been sort of talking over each other a little bit.
We were.
There's some dashes and some back and forth, but she did, in fact, answer your question about why Fabian might help clean up.
She did.
We talked a lot about transcripts on your cross. How many pages of different transcripts do you think you've reviewed in this case?
Just an estimate in the thousands. Between my pretrial interviews, I believe there was 3 or 4. Between the original investigations, all those interviews, witness interviews, pretrial interviews with witnesses in this case, other transcripts, there's thousands upon thousands of pages.
So when you're asking for transcripts, are you just trying to be accurate?
I want to be accurate. I don't want to put out wrong information in this trial.
There were some questions on cross about the trip to the Giant with Victoria that the defendant took between about 6 and 6:20, I believe. Let me show you 368. So we have here between about 6 and 6:25, phone records show defendant and Victoria go to the gas station, he buys vodka, she gets her a soda, and we've seen now a still photo of that.
Yes.
And there was questions about this call at the same time, essentially, between Jessica and her sister Crystal. Now, just before this, and there was an agreement, a fair agreement, that the defendant was not there during that call. Is that right?
Yes, ma'am.
But just before this, was there an exchange inside apartment 808 between the defendant, Jessica, and Victoria about some money that was given to her?
Yes. In fact, there was some money that Victoria had, I don't remember the exact amount, or that was exchanged and given. So all 3 of them were dealing, and I mean by all 3 of them, the defendant, Michelle Martens, and Jessica Kelley, and at that time Victoria, with some money that eventually the defendant gave to Victoria.
And there was some confusion, and I think the jury's actually heard a clip because the defendant talked about this exchange in his initial interview with detectives. Do you recall that?
Yes, and it was confusing on what and why.
Where the money came from. I think some neighbors have testified, or read statements from neighbors testified hearing about Victoria getting this money. And then the defendant tells police in his initial interview that he took the money because Michelle and Jessica wanted Victoria to lie about it, and that's the money he used at the Giant.
And it's not a question.
So let's rephrase that question and open-end it.
Where did the defendant get the money he used at the Giant from?
It was this money we're talking about, this exchange, and it's confusing, between Victoria and the defendant and Michelle Martens and Jessica. They seem we're all involved in that. But the defendant ended up with that money to go to Giant from Victoria.
And we know that the defendant and Michelle arrived home about 5:05.
That's correct.
So it had to have happened sometime between 5:05 and about 6. Is that
Correct.
fair?
In that less than an hour period of time.
And do phone records show that Michelle Martens was in the house with Jessica when that call took place?
While the defendant and Victoria went to the Giant?
That's correct.
There were some questions about this 12:33 a.m. text about doing a line and some inference or implication that was really the only time the defendant has talked about meth. Do you recall in his police interview telling detectives he put Jessica's meth in the nightstand? Or that she put it in the nightstand?
I don't remember the exact words, but he talked about Jessica's meth and the nightstand.
You also talked about seeing some pipes, and you said one was documented. And by pipe, I mean it was a homemade item.
Homemade tinfoil. It looked like tinfoil pipe to me.
And how was this documented at the scene?
I recall two separate ones, and they're both by scene photographs.
And one is in, where are they?
One is on the windowsill of the master bathroom, and one is observed, it looks like the second search on the 26th of August. You don't see it on initial photographs, overall photographs of the hall bathroom, and then it appears the trash was dumped out, and then you can see the tinfoil pipe on the floor.
There was some discussion about after the barbecue when Jessica leaves with Willie and gets meth.
Yes, ma'am.
And we see this 7:45 p.m. call between Jessica and the defendant. Do you recall that?
Yes.
Do you know what the content of that call was? Does anyone know, aside from the two people on the line?
No, just the defendant and Jessica Kelley.
And there was some, I'm going to show you 268, may I approach? You may. And actually, so that call is at 7:45. Were there also some text messages between the defendant and his cousin? I'm going to show you 268. Regarding the twins.
So there is on August 22nd, which is the following day, we're talking about around 12:48 in the afternoon.
AM or PM?
That's going to be afternoon. There's, I'm waiting for the twins and they are bullshitting. That is from Jessica Kelley a text from Jessica Kelley to the defendant.
And what time was that at?
It shows UTC -6. I apologize, it is 12:24 a.m. I'm still stuck on police 24-hour time. So it's 12:24 and 48 seconds a.m. on the 22nd.
So there were some questions about the text earlier where they might have been upset with each other, but then we have this phone call, a lengthy phone call at 7:45, and then do those texts appear that they're still in a dispute?
No, it doesn't, because right afterwards it's the defendant sends a text message back, says, okay, bye.
I'm going to publish 268 so the jury can see those texts also. Did you determine who the twins were?
Yes, we did.
And who were they? What were they doing with Jessica and Lily?
They were, I don't know which one of the twins. One of them was selling both Jessica Kelley and Willie Hollis a large amount of methamphetamine.
There were some questions about bath salts, and you said that was a rumor that came up.
That's
Is there
correct.
any evidence ever obtained that bath salts were a part of this case aside from this rumor?
No, and when we questioned we keep calling them twins, the sisters, they denied that. And when I went to interview other folks in this case, everyone denied that.
You were asked a question, something along the lines of, were you investigating if Jessica Kelley and Willie Hollis took bath salts? Were you also investigating whether or not the defendant took bath salts?
I had an open investigation, and essentially still do, of who took what. So yes.
May we approach him? Maybe. Detective Lewis, I'm going to show you what's been marked for identification as States 401, and I know it may be a little out of context, but can you review this and see if this looks like an interview that you conducted with the defendant? Or part of it, I should say.
It is page 11 and 12 of an interview I conducted with the defendant.
And do you mind, Your Honor, the state would move for admission of States 401 into evidence?
Well, I would think that she was going to refresh his memory of it rather than introduce the
Do you have an
document.
objection to it being introduced?
No.
341 will be admitted.
Detective, if I can point you to, on page 11, line 14, if you can read for the jury this line of questioning about who was present in the apartment the morning of August 23rd.
So this is page 11, line 14 I'm starting. My question is, so do you remember what time you woke up on Tuesday morning, the 23rd? The defendant responded, let's say like 6:45, 7. I asked, okay, and who was in the apartment at that time? The defendant responded, me, Michelle, Matthew, Victoria, and Jessica. Continue.
Please.
Starting with line 22, Detective Lewis, okay. And where was everyone sleeping? Walk me through that morning, the 23rd. Where was everyone sleeping? Mr. Gonzales responded, me and Michelle were sleeping in the master bedroom. I responded, okay. The defendant then stated, Victoria slept in her room. Again, I responded, okay. Mr. Gonzales stated, and I'm not sure if Matthew slept in the room where Jessica was supposed to stay or if he slept with Victoria in her room. I stated, okay. Mr. Gonzales went on, and I think Jessica stayed in the living room and slept in the living room. My response was, okay. The defendant then stated that or stayed up all night in the living room. I responded, okay, okay, okay. So what do you remember you get up that morning?
Thank you, Detective. You were asked about the washing machine and the sheets. And you were specifically asked about some of these items that I think were located on top of the dryer. Did Jessica Kelley ever indicate to you that she washed sheets because she wanted to sleep in Matthew's bed and he had wet the bed?
There was urine on the bedding, and she wanted to clean it, so she sleep on the bed.
And this is how, I'm publishing states 28. This photo is a scene photo showing how these items were located the morning of the 24th after the homicide.
That is correct.
Were these items on top of the dryer dry items?
I believe the only wet ones that were located are just to the right on this photograph. They're actually in Exhibit 24, and you can see those items.
So there were no wet blankets. There were wet towels in the washer itself.
That's correct.
You were asked a question about Victoria's underwear and about, in general, your experience with people soiling themselves when they're strangled. Was there any evidence of that, aside from a stain here?
There's just a dark stain on her underwear.
And we heard from Dr. Ash Kendrick, who says sometimes that happens and sometimes that doesn't happen. Is that your experience as well?
Yes, that's correct.
Was there any evidence on Victoria's body that she had fecal matter or anything like that on her?
Not that I recall, no.
You were asked a question with the implication that Jessica turned off her phone. Is there any evidence in your investigation that her phone was turned off?
I know of none.
I'm sorry?
I know of none. No evidence.
Is there any evidence that, like the defendant and Michelle's phone, that her phone appeared to leave the apartment and go off of the Wi-Fi?
There's been so much in the last 2 days. Without reviewing the records, I just don't want to be inaccurate on that question.
Understood. Exhibit 275. Mr. Ames, do you possibly have 275? We'll come back to it, but Let's talk a little bit about Facebooking. There were some questions about, isn't this just normal Facebooking on the night of the murder? Let's look back, though, to a different night, the night of the barbecue, and the defendant's Facebooking on that night. Do you recall your testimony on direct about after the barbecue, a couple of Facebook posts that the defendant posted on 8/21, at 8:23, and then at 9:18?
I do.
And I'm going to publish States 370. Does that look familiar?
Yes, it does.
So this is what the defendant posted in the midst of his post-barbecue contact with his brothers and with Angelo and Amanda, correct?
During all the threats that were going on, yes, that's correct.
And this is another one that he posted there around that same time.
That is correct.
The night of the so, in your opinion, do those things seem to relate to the situation he was in?
I would say so, yes.
Let's move to the actual night of the murder. We have this post and this post. Would you have a similar opinion about the tone of these posts and what's potentially going on in 808?
I do have a similar opinion, yes.
And you said the records were limited?
The Facebook records that we obtained were only, I think, if I remember correctly, there's only on the activity logger six events on those records.
So it doesn't give you a real clear picture of what typical or normal might look like anyway.
No, I've reviewed records that are thousands of pages long.
So let's talk about the TV. Have you reviewed the lapels in this case from
Yes.
the first responders?
Yes, I have.
How many times?
I can't remember, several.
And do lapel videos have sound? Can you hear what's going on?
Yes,
So if the TV were on at high volume, that would have been picked up on the officer's lapels, correct?
it should have been.
You were asked the question, did you know she didn't take a bath that day or night? Is there any evidence about Victoria's last shower or bath?
None that I know of.
So there's no evidence that she didn't take a bath or a shower before her murder?
That's correct.
You were also asked about her school records and the scrapes and the bumps, but I think you testified on direct, and correct me if I'm wrong, that her school records indicate nothing happened to her at school that day that was documented.
There was nothing documented on August 23rd, 2016. There's nothing in the records documenting anything.
And are you aware of any playing with neighborhood boys at the apartment complex?
I didn't see any information led me to believe that she was playing with any children at the complex on the 23rd.
And her outfit that day, we talked a little bit about that, was an attached jumper.
The one-piece jumper?
Did that particular garment plus the Y DNA located on Victoria's back, did those two things have significance to you when you put them together?
If I understand what you're asking is to understand, I think, because I don't know, I wasn't here for the testimony, but I think what the defense is saying was somehow there was transfer, somebody touched, obviously males, we don't know if men, just males, would have touched the jumper, and then it traveled through the jumper onto Victoria's skin to be later detected through the swabbings. Is that what you're asking me?
Yes.
Okay, I think I understand what you're asking me. Then we know there's a number of male profiles on the red T-shirt that was found around her neck, but we don't see that. We would expect potentially to see the same thing on her neck, and we didn't. It just always struck me that, and I don't know, I concentrated on the DNA on the neck, the hands, and the fingernails through training and experience. I can't answer why we're seeing this. I don't know that we will ever be able to answer why we're seeing this.
There were some questions about juvenile males that you swabbed, and I think you indicated you took a swab from Victoria's little brother. Did you also get a swab from Jessica Kelley's son?
I don't believe I did, but during the investigation, I believe, yes, Mondo was swabbed as part of this investigation.
And he had been at the apartment a couple of nights before on Saturday, I think?
So I believe it was Saturday, yes.
In the course of your investigation, were there any juvenile males that you identified that needed to be swabbed that you didn't swab?
No.
Is there, there was also questions about whether or not you had, or the investigation had, some tunnel vision in just looking at Ys. And you explained that the state lab, did the state lab do the first round of testing?
Yes, they did.
And how many tests did they run?
Countless. I can't even, without reading all those reports that were generated, I can't tell you, there's many, many, many.
Did the Florida lab test anything that hadn't already been tested by the state lab?
I recall that what was sent to them were the advanced testing of a lot of things that had already been tested.
Do you remember sending extracts, the little tubes to them?
Yes, the extracts, which of course had already been tested. I don't have any specific recollection of any brand new testing that the Florida lab did.
And the test that Florida did, looking for male DNA, is it fair to say that those tests were done because the state lab had detected mixtures of male DNA or male DNA that was at a low level, and the idea was that Florida may be able to get a better profile or give us something additional?
That's correct. They had I don't know if you describe it, newer or better software, but they had software and DNA analysis that the state lab did not have at that time.
Was the idea in your investigation to try and exclude Jessica Kelley or exonerate her and focus only on the defendant?
No, it was to get to the truth, to try and figure out what was going on. That's the whole point.
Were you even focused on this defendant after you got the Y profile from the state lab on Victoria's back, as far as seeing what else was on her body?
Was I focused on the defendant? Before then, we knew he wasn't there. And I meant he wasn't there when the murder occurred.
I think you were asked a question, and I may have misheard it, but just to clarify, I think you were asked when Victoria was killed, were people outside? Do you have any specific information as to exactly when Victoria was killed and who was outside then?
No, our best information throughout the investigation was Victoria was murdered sometime on the 23rd between 7:05 and 8:48 p.m. that evening. We know from witnesses that at 8:48, when Michelle Martens and Fabian Gonzales arrived, that there were people outside then.
So the people you described are the people outside at 8:48?
Correct.
May I have a moment, or may we approach her?